It is simply about the daughter. That's all it's about. A simple request, because for her, it was about her daughter. Since the middle of March, with the pandemic that has been upon us and that we have been living amongst, we are well aware of the impact that it has had, especially on our elderly population who have been confined to nursing homes and other assisted living complexes. Recently, a middle-aged woman was sharing with me her anguish that she had for all these months as she tried to stay connected with her mother, who's in one such care facility, not here in Wilmer, but in another community. And she would go weekly, and she would, of course, go to visit her mother, and she would sit outside on the other side of the window. And at first, of course, during the months of March and April, when it was cold, she would visit with her mother on the phone, her mom on one side of the window and her on the other side. And they would visit, and they would laugh, but yet the mother kept saying, I want to see my daughter. I want to see my daughter. She kept saying to the staff, I want to see my daughter. And so, of course, with the warming of the days, why, then they opened up the window and they didn't have to talk on the phone anymore, but the daughter and her mother were able to visit with one another through the screen. And yet, there was still the persistence from the elderly woman, I want to see my daughter. For her, it was about seeing her daughter. Till finally, one week, this middle-aged woman was sharing with me, she arrived to visit her mother, and lo and behold, she sat down to discover, as she was going to visit with her mother, that the screen had been removed from the window. And her mother was sitting right there. And her mother could finally see her daughter. And the middle-aged woman said, Mom, how did this happen? And of course, her mother looked at her daughter and said, she says, I finally convinced the nursing assistant to get rid of the screen. Amazing, isn't it? It was simply about seeing her daughter. And finally, it took an elderly woman to realize that maybe if we just remove the screen, my wish will be granted. And I will be able to not only hear my daughter's voice, but I might clearly see her face. It's about the daughter, and that's what today's gospel is all about. It's about recognizing, as this elderly woman in the nursing home realized, that relationships is always more important than regulations. Relationships is always more important than the regulations. Not saying that the regulations aren't important, not saying that at all, they are. But for that particular elderly woman, the relationship she had with her daughter was far more important, as was the case with the Canaanite woman in today's gospel story. She had one mission in mind, and one mission only, that her daughter might be healed. It was simply about her daughter. And notice with this Canaanite woman, her behavior and her attitudes are constantly changing in this gospel story we just heard. Why, at first, she's noisy. She keeps calling out after Jesus, and the disciples are incredibly frustrated because she won't shut up. She's noisy. But notice the behavior changes. And all of a sudden, from being noisy to when Jesus finally, of course, acknowledges her and makes it clear that it's not right to eat, not to give the food to the dogs. Why, notice what happens to her. She becomes creative. She moves from being noisy to one of pleading, to one of begging, to one of creative thinking. Well, Master, even the dogs get to eat the scraps from the Master's table. You see, that's why the Canaanite woman was acknowledged by Jesus in today's gospel as being a woman who had great faith. And faith, my friends, is more than just a profession, which you and I will do in a few moments, where we will profess our faith. Faith, in this case, is recognizing that there is someone who can make her daughter's life better. And not only better, but whole again. And so because of that, this woman is willing to be noisy, she's willing to be confrontative, she's willing to be creative, she's willing to beg, she's willing to plead, she's willing to do anything it takes, because for her, it is simply about her daughter. She recognizes that relationships are more important than religion or ethnicity, or that which divides us so oftentimes, because, of course, Jesus is single-focused as well, and for him, it's about bringing the message, it's about bringing the good news to the lost of the house of Israel. In other words, for Jesus, his initial mission was quite simply set out to bring back to God all of the Jewish people. But all of a sudden, here's a Canaanite woman, a Gentile, one who worships the gods of Tyre and Sidon. And yet, this Canaanite woman sees in Jesus the possibility as the one who can make her daughter's life better. And so that's what makes her faith great, because she is on a mission. She uses her creativity. She uses her willingness to beg and to plead. She who recognizes that in her midst is a God who can recognize and who can save and can heal her daughter. So she will do anything because relationships are always more important than the religion we profess. Relationships are always more important than the regulations we establish. Relationships are always more important than the faith that we profess and the doctrines that we hold and the creed that we pray. Relationships are what we are called to enter into, because it is only there that we will discover the one, the God who dwells in our hearts, in the hearts of the people we are called to love and to live with here each and every day. And once we recognize that that one is indeed inhabiting our lives and the lives of the people around us, why then we need to be singular-minded, and we need to have the same mission as the Canaanite woman in today's gospel, and we need to set out and we need to be willing to beg and to plead and to confront and to be creative. We need to find ways to remove the screen so that we can see the people that are in our midst, who call out to us for help, and whom we call out to for help as well. Because once we see one another, once we hear one another's voices, why, we will see and we will hear the God who dwells within each and every one of our hearts. And then we will come to know what the Canaanite woman believed in the very depths of her being, that God can make us better.